And welcome back to Analyzing the Magnus Archives. Today we are covering episode 9 of Father's Love and episode 10, Vampire Killer. Again, covering these two episodes and the continuation of the long, dreadful, of the Dread Powers into Magnus Archives, covering all 200 episodes of those. Listen to these. I'll have links in the description if you want. If you should listen to those. And yeah, I guess let's get out of the way. So, this statement of case number 0020312, statement of Julia Montauk regarding the actions and motivations of her father, the serial killer Robert Montauk. Julia is the daughter of the serial killer Robert Montauk, who killed at least 40 people in the last 5 years, which even on serial killer standards, because I've listened to a few serial killer podcasts, that's a lot.
Quite a few people.
Quite a few people.
You could fill an entire room with that many people.
You could, or you can fill an entire shed of hearts and jars with that. Whoa, spoilers. But anyways, so Julia had always lived in York Road in Dartford, and when she was 7, she awoke to noises downstairs. When she went to investigate, she found the back door had opened, and her mother, Lynette's silver pendant, was on the kitchen table. This pendant, a abstract design of a hand with a closed eye on it. I wonder what that means.
Before this too, she gives a bit of background on it. She says she's not there to clear her father's name. Mm-hmm. She says that some of the sources are more true than others, and she's really sick of people talking about it. Anyways. Then she gets into the story.
Yes. So Julia, of course, woke her father up, who became very concerned when he saw the pendant. He turned on the tap, and dark, dirty water began to flow out, which smelled salty and brackish. The light also blew in the kitchen and told her dad that her dad told her she had to go to bed as he left the house. And the next day he returned and told Julia that her mother was gone. Big sad. And even though he was a policeman, Robert didn't log a missing persons report, as we later come to find out. Though it was, again, that was not discovered until much later, but he started drinking and spending a lot of his time in his shed. He was gone most nights, and the shed in the back of the garden smelled strongly like tinned meat. Although Julia never, noted that.
They got a brand new shiny lock as soon as her mother disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
So
lovely.
Yeah.
And on one evening, Robert came into Julia's room whilst she was pretending to sleep, albeit. Also.
Occasionally sounds of power tools from inside of the shed. That's important. So is the heart pendant. It's not even a heart.
It's a hand with a closed eye.
The hand pendant. Continue. Okay, tinned meat.
So while Julia was pretending to be asleep, her father came into the room and he wore like dark stained overalls, and his hands smelled of blood and like brackish water, and he whispered that he promised to protect her. He seemed to be injured, and he also later he seemed to be injured just constantly. Robert Montauk always seemed to be injured around the house, and Julia became good at cleaning up very small bloodstains that would just appear in hallways.
Okay.
Just assuming that it was her father's, doing whatever he was doing in that shed of his. He also told Julia that he had been moved to the night shift, but it was actually at this point that he had quit the police force and resigned.
Yeah, she says he's a pretty good father. Like, he spends all day with her when he's not in the shed, which is good. So, what's the problem?
Good father.
Here?
What's the problem here? The 40 plus hearts in the shed. Nah. And then when Julia was 10, she took a phone call from someone who had claimed to be Detective Rainier Rainier, who had claimed to be Detective Rainier with a new case. He sounded old and possibly German, although she says she lumped a lot of languages into German, so...
As kids do.
Yeah, as kids do. They don't know no better. Those kids. Her father then spoke to him saying no and, not all right, do it yourself, before just saying that he'll do it as soon as possible. Whatever this conversation may be. And he spent the rest of that day in the shed. Julia did not know where, she mentions that she doesn't know where the bodies were whenever they were recovered and that they were never recovered by the police. However, she never told them about the photographs. Her dad converted a guest room they had in the house to a dark room after their mom disappeared. And usually it was always locked, but one day, her father would let her in. She would take photos of random stuff and they develop them in there. Because, how else do you explain that to a child other than, pretending, I guess. But anyways, the door was unlocked one day.
Yeah, he says that he doesn't trust developers not to ruin his films. Is the explanation he gives. But again, father-daughter bonding time. How beautiful and wonderful.
And then back to the whole power tool construction thing she'd hear from the shed. He would occasionally bring out like a small wooden trinket every now and again. But other than that, the shed would just be pure silence. Wonder what he'd be doing in there. But anyways, it was these photos with faces with symbols drawn over them. Although she admits she was not sure if those were the victims, she asked her dad about it, who hugged her for like the last time and then left. It was later that night, or morning I should say, at around like 3 a.m, when Julia woke up to get a glass of water, but when she turned on the tap, that same brackish water flowed, from before. Looking outside, the streetlights seemed to not reach as far as usual, and then they began to blow out sequentially. There was then a knock at the door, gradually sounding less human with each knock, and a growling sound. It'll sound like wet meat. Wet meat. She then ran outside the back door, running into the garden towards the shed, from which a blue light was pulsing from inside the shed. And when she ran in there to see her dad, bathed in said blue light, standing over a corpse with its chest open, clutching a knife in one hand and the bloody heart in the other. He was chanting, and the heart in his hand and those in jars on the walls beat in time to his chant. As the presence got closer to the shed, her dad's chanting reached its crescendo as he plunged the knife into the heart, and with that presence disappeared and the light faded. Robert then looked at his daughter, apologized as police sirens, were heard, and he ran.
Yeah, she called the police earlier when she was trying to escape the wet meat.
The wet meat.
The wet meat.
She also noted that the body had the same pendant as her mom. And then there was a manhunt for Robert, which ended in his incarceration.
We can talk to him later. He comes back.
That's right.
Yeah.
Spoilers. Bad. But anyways, we also get skeptical Johnny Sims as per usual, saying that the body that Julia saw belonged to Christopher Lorme. And that there were 41 hearts in total, 11 on each inner wall and 7 on the door and the one in Robert's hand. He suspects that this pendant is from the People's Church of the Divine Host, founded by the defrocked Pentecostal minister MacLeod Rainier. This appears to be the same name as in the Mag 7, the Piper. This Rainier was also the same body. The name of the body that Wilfred Owen was in that crater with for a week. Who knows if that's got any relation? Who knows? But John, of course, he believes all this to be a coincidence. That Johnny Sims, you skeptical man. Christopher was apparently also a part of this church, and his family had not heard of him in 6 years before the murder in 1994. Rainier disappeared, and the church disbanded shortly thereafter. Robert Montauk then died in Wakefield Prison November 1st of 2002. He was stabbed 47 times in the chest and bled out. No murder weapon was received, and he was found locked in the cell, although the light bulb had been blown, leaving him in darkness.
They also add earlier when Julia is giving her speech that the light bulbs go out in their house all the time.
Yeah, and I think her father said that is oh yeah, we just have bad wiring.
that's what happens.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, then again, not much going on in this episode. Timestamp here to skip over the little theory section to start episode 10. But again, while we discuss this theory's Ollie, get out of here. Of course, we get Julia, Trevor coming back later.
Yeah.
I forgot that Robert comes back a little bit, some point, right? And again, we get the hunt, the dark, in this episode. Little bits of the hunt, I would suppose. Maxwell Rainier, he'll die later. After trying to put his body into a child. We also, this is the first time we get the still and lightless beast that the church seems to like just seek on people occasionally, if I remember correctly. So yes, Mag episode 10, Vampire Killer.
You get to go talk to Trevor.
Oh, my favorite man. My favorite boy. Case number 0100710, statement of Trevor Herbert regarding his life as the self-proclaimed vampire killer.
Vampire hunter.
Vampire hunter, vampire killer, he does all the same. That Trevor, my man. So, Trevor the Tramp Herbert. He lives in the streets of Manchester for most of his life. His father killed his mother whilst under the influence of alcohol in 1956. Although the court ruled it an accident, his father drank himself to death 4 months later, leaving him and his brother orphans. He and his brother Nigel spent a lot of their time in foster homes, but because they would always be split up, they decided to just live on the streets together. Which, fair enough. Trevor explains that he sees vampires as more animalistic than human-like. There are, you think of a vampire and you think of that guy. But for Trevor, these vampires are more meticulous and very wrong.
Yeah, they're different. I'm going to pause you there. I'm going to say Trevor opens the statement by saying he's killed 5 people he knows for sure vampires, and there are 2 more that may or may have not been.
Yes.
He accidentally killed a human at one point, but he was a violent criminal, so he doesn't feel too bad about it.
That's right.
He leaves proof of vampire teeth with the statement,
Yeah.
which John talks about later.
Yep.
And then he talks about Trevor is not worried about getting reported to the police for murders, as he recently got a diagnosis for late-stage lung cancer and isn't expecting to be living longer. Will come up later with Martin. He says he killed his first vampire in 1959.
He talks about vampires initially. They're more animalistic. They don't speak, as they don't have space in their throat for a vocal box.
Which is fun information.
Fun information. And except they have a sort of tubular tongue.
They communicate through kind of
telepathy, hypnosis, some sort of thing. You'll think that they're speaking to you, and in actuality, if you think for a moment, you'll realize they haven't really moved their mouth or said a word. And they can go out in daylight. He makes this very clear. They can go out in daylight, contrary to popular belief. And they don't reproduce by feeding as well, but he isn't sure how they dispose of the bodies. And this is when he starts talking about in autumn of 1959, a few years later after they go through foster homes, and Trevor is 16 and his brother is 19 at the time, and they meet a creature who claims to be Sylvia McDonald. In an alley next to the King's Arms Hotel. Taking them back to her house, it seemed mostly unlived in, except for some clear trails through dust.
Yeah,
and
pretty gross.
Does not seem like this house has been used in a proper house-using fashion. The boys, Nigel and Trevor, they're taken to separate rooms and they begin to, sleep there for whatever reason. But eventually is unsettled by the building, and later that night they decide to just try and leave. Before they do so, however, Sylvia comes into the bedroom. As Trevor hides under the bed, she attacks Nigel, tearing his throat out with her shark-like teeth, draining his blood with that tubular tongue. And when she's finished, she lies satiated on the floor, and this is when Trevor attacked her with Nigel's penknife that he had dropped when she was being attacked. Her stomach then bursts after, Trevor just stabs her a few times.
Bursts like a sick balloon.
Yeah. He then took a candle to her dress, where instantly just went up in flames. He then fled the burning building, and that was his first encounter what he believed to be vampires. And it would not be until 10 years later, in 1968, Trevor had discounted the events as his brother's death, basically just being a dream or a nightmare or whatever, basically. Yeah, I'll mention it now. He's big drug user at this time. Lots of heroin and stuff, which we'll play in a moment. And he is, just asking people for money and beggars and whatever. And then one man who named Robert Arden communicates with him, this weird telepathy sort of thing, that he will not be getting any money. This is when Trevor realizes that this man is a vampire like Sylvia McDonald had been all those years ago. He decides to follow this man back after he also lures a woman, to, hey, come back to my house with me. So she's like, okay, and Trevor tells them, and Robert Arden, as the woman is sitting in a chair, Trevor's peeping through a window when he sees this creature creep up behind the chair that the woman's sitting in, and his jaw just unhinges, and this is when Trevor just breaks through the window, kind of just jumps in and he goes and stabs.
He feels Robert's skin too, and he says it feels
right.
like a bruised apple.
Yeah.
Pretty gross.
Yes, weird.
We love Magnus vampires.
We like John describing grotesque things. But this is when the creature Robert Arden bites into Trevor's neck. And as soon as it does that, it recoils in this weird pain. Trevor mentions that it could very well be the heroin in his system, in his blood, that the vampire does not like.
Trevor says, I do not know if you've ever felt your blood being sucked out of you, but I would not recommend it. So, if anyone's looking for Magnus vampires, cease now. Trevor's giving you a warning.
So, as this, woman... as that's happening, the woman comes in with a kitchen knife and starts stabbing the vampire as well, getting it off of Trevor, and then she promptly bails. Trevor, takes the time to, grab his improvised little wooden stake he carved, and just stab it into the chest of Robert Arden, the creature vampire. And then Trevor just torches it and leaves. He explains that he also killed a man named Allard DuPont in 1982, but he realized afterwards that it wasn't a vampire. He was, however, a very violent criminal. And this is when the statement promptly just kind of cuts off, oddly enough. And we get exposition from John saying that Martin, who was present at the time, says that Trevor explained that he needed some sleep and they went to the break room to lie down, in which that is when he died of his late-stage lung cancer. Anyways, John continues, skepticism as he is, saying that there were reports in 1959 of a fire that consumed a house on Loom Street, and remains of an 18-year-old boy were recovered, but no one else. Robert Arden's disappearance was also corroborated by police reports, and Allard DuPont was found partially burned in his home on August 2nd of 1982. And also, again, back to the teeth, the vampire teeth, Trevor left with this statement. They appear to be shark teeth, is what John says. Yeah. And he gave them to the King's College in London to try and see if they were shark teeth.
Please let me in.
They are shark teeth, or some sort, but they do not match any known species.
And the statement is a photocopy of a photocopy.
Yes, that's right. The statement, is a copy of a copy. So who knows where the original is. And the evidence itself isn't found within the archives. It also appears that the subject of the requisitions of various law enforcement and government officials' contracts that the Institute has, so as to reason for maybe the photocopy of a photocopy. Who knows? But then that is where this episode leaves off. Going into spoilers, again, simple. Trevor Herbert, The Hunt. He later comes back, and I believe later, is it this season where we get part 2 of his statement, or is it season 2? I think it's season 2. Possibly. We'll see the other half of Trevor Herbert's statement
yes,
later on
he
the
didn't
line.
die on
He didn't die on the couch of lung cancer, which I really like to. I'd like to know how that went about. Like, was he just in the morgue and then he woke up and he just kind of left?
I think he just probably fell asleep and someone was like, he's probably dead.
He's just so old and like cancer ridden that he's just he lies down and like stops breathing for a moment and everyone's like, shit, he's dead.
You know, you see an old person in furniture sometimes and you're like, I'm just gonna let someone else deal with that.
But anyways, that was this short, wonderful, quick episode of Analyzing the Magnus Archives. Mag's
Not
episode,
Protocol.
not Protocol, Archives. Mag's episode 9 and 10, A Father's Love and Vampire Killer. Next time, we will be, whenever we want to do this again, Mag's episode 11 and 12, Dreamer and First Aid. If my memory serves me correct, I really liked First Aid.
I also really like First Aid.
Yeah, because that's another war one, right? No.
I think it's the one in the forest.
The hospital, forest, yeah.
Yes.
But, of course, if you like this, please leave comments and likes and subscribes, and bye. Alright. I don't know.
So many people dying on Magnus Institute property furniture. Dying in this case.
Bang, 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 bang.
Well, we have him. We have girls.
Bang!
Yeah.
Yeah.